Perfect.
That's great. Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me. Good to see everybody and to hear where you are and which community asset you're involved with. I just said before you came onto the hall, I can't see you guys from here, but I'm on the Moray Firth. So if I look out the window there, I'm looking up towards you guys, about 350 miles away. It's probably just as cold here as it is with you at the moment. Some snow on the hills here today. I'm from DTAS. I'm wondering how many people know of DTAS, have heard of DTAS. Maybe some of you are members. I was going to start my presentation this evening with giving a bit of information about DTAS, because we're kind of split into 3 different component parts within DTAS, and then I was going to focus on the facilities management support service that we have within DTAS, which has been going now for about a year and a half. So I can talk about that, what it is, how it could be of benefit to yourselves, what we've kind of found out from running that support service for the last year and a half, where it's going to go to, and also because you're representing village halls, also talk about a joint new digital resource that DTAS have put together and launched together with SCVO, so the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations, which is a digital hub handbook for village halls and community hubs. So I can show you some of that online as well. Any questions you can ask me as we go along. At some point, I'm keen to hear if there's any facility management questions, issues that you're having yourselves. So we'll try and cover that as well. If I talk too much, put your hand up and tell me to be quiet. Any questions, just go for it. I'm going to share my screen and we can get into some slides. So I'm going to do that. Share screen for this one. Hopefully this works just as well as it did when we were testing it. Is that visible to everybody? Okay, and now if I put on the slideshow mode, oh, that's wonderful. So that should be good. Everybody should be able to see that in slideshow mode. Great. And can everyone hear me okay? Just to check. Okay, loud and clear. That's great. Okay, so DTAS is Facility Management Support Service. It's been going for a year and a half. We haven't got that much capacity because it's just me running it at the moment. It's a pilot program for 2 years, which is funded by the William Grant Foundation. The premise for the support service was there is quite a lot of support to development trust and community groups to actually acquire an asset as a community. There's also some funding and support available for the initial capital build or capital refurb, but there's a lack of support for the actual operational management, the regulatory responsibilities, all the stuff that you need to do to keep a hall or to keep any community-owned asset or community-managed asset fit for purpose and thriving, if you like. So that's kind of the idea behind the support service, which started 1.5 years ago. But just briefly to touch on DTAS, the Development Trust Association Scotland. As I said, we've got 3 parts to our organisation. Firstly, the DTAS part, and that's a member-led organisation. We have now just coming up to 360 now development trust members throughout Scotland. And we're here to promote, support and strengthen that movement in Scotland. We have a number of development officers who are regionally spread, and they support development trusts or groups becoming a development trust, so in their incorporation and their initial governance, but also once they are development trusts, they're supported through their lifetime by our development officers. What binds all those development trusts? They're all enterprising, community-led organisations, and they're across towns, cities, rural, island locations, all throughout Scotland, and they're all working towards regeneration and wealth building in a defined area, so they are geographic communities. We recently had our 20-year anniversary with a big annual conference down in Glasgow, which was really good. Good to see the movement, how it's developed over 20 years, the issues that everybody is facing, and lots of positive, resilient stories amongst all those development trusts and the people that are a committee member, a volunteer staff, and the wider community as well. The second part of DTAS is what we call the Community Ownership Support Service. Now, you don't have to be a DTAS member to access this service. Basically, any community organisation in Scotland whether you're unincorporated, incorporated, you own an asset, you do not yet own an asset, or you're looking to take on an asset, can access this support service. It's funded by the Scottish Government, and we help community organisations take ownership of assets into the community. That's via the Community Empowerment Act, and more often than not, that's following a community asset transfer process. But it also includes the community right to buy legislation as well. So the community asset transfer process is for taking a public asset into community ownership, and ownership can mean the freehold ownership, but it can also mean a leasehold or a management agreement as well. The community right to buy legislation is kind of a first right of refusal option for a community to take on a privately owned asset. It's much less used than the community asset transfer, but we've got, I think, also regionally based advisors, community ownership support service advisors, who provide support and guidance to community organisations from the outset up until the actual community asset transfer itself, and also some post community asset transfer support as well. And we also support the local authorities as well. So we kind of bridge the gap. So a local authority has to follow the Community Empowerment Act legislation. There's lots of things they have to do. They have to have a list of all their assets. They have to show which communities have actually done a community asset transfer request. And once that happens, they have to go through a specific process. So we kind of manage that between the community organisations and kind of the local authority to make sure they're following the Community Empowerment Act legislation to the book, if you like. Third part of DTAS is Community Shares Scotland. This has been going for about 10 years, and we are supporting communities raising alternative finance. Mostly that's community share issues and community bond issues. So raising that money within the community for the community, more often than not, looking at a service, a facility, an asset in that community which is at danger of being lost. So it can often be a shop, it could be a community hub, it could be, and it's quite often a pub or a combination thereof, if you like, how you can raise money within that community to keep that business going and available for the community as a resilient working business for the future. I think we've helped communities raise about £17 million to date over the last 10 years. And it's a growing area of DTAS's support at the moment. It also kind of feeds into community benefit funds, which we're doing a lot of work on at the moment. Shared ownership of renewable developments is also an area we're looking into at the moment. So that's a growing area of DTAS. So those are the three component parts of DTAS, the organisation which I'm representing this evening. Any questions on those first few slides? I can't actually see if somebody's asking or putting a hand up, so maybe Aisha, you can keep track of that. Or am I good to carry on?
I'm just having a look. There's nothing at the moment. You're good to carry on.
That's great. Okay, so our facility management support service, as I said, this was set up about 1.5 years ago with funding from the William Grant Foundation. And what have we done? We've put together a suite of online open source resources covering all areas of, or what we hope are all areas of facility management. These resources are available to anybody to access via our website. If you look at this slide, then our resource library can be accessed via the website here. This presentation will be sent to everybody following this, so everybody will get access to this. And on that website, on those dedicated web pages, you can find out lots of information, guidance, checklists, signposting to other third parties on a wide area of facility management topics. So some of them are listed here. So it's available for everybody, and that's been very well used for the last 1.5 years. So it's kind of the first point of call if there's, for some community asset owning organizations who have a query about asset facility management, they're aware of this support service, they'll go to the website and they'll see if they can find the information. So that's there for everybody to use. Managing community buildings, I wrote down, you're pretty much all representing a hall used by the community. So when managing community buildings and looking at facilities management or asset and facilities management, we break it into 3 component parts. there are legal and regulatory responsibilities that have to be fulfilled. If you own and manage a hall or rent and manage a hall, it's important to make sure that those issues are dealt with, the boxes are ticked, and you can rest easy and focus on the core front of house activities that you're providing to the community within that asset. You also need to think about the building fabric, so the maintenance of that hall, that it remains in a state that's fit for purpose, that the necessary checks are done, the necessary maintenance is carried out, and also at some point thinking about, if that's your responsibility as owner, could also be your responsibility as tenant of a hall or another community asset, that sometimes there are replacements, there are investments that need to be made as well. So the hall doesn't fall into a state of disrepair. And there's many areas of operational management that need to be dealt with under the term facilities management as well, ranging from your utility contracts, statutory checks of installations, staff contracts, management contracts, procurement, a whole long list. So that's kind of the three main areas that we kind of break facilities management into. A definition. We'll read it out. It's from the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management. What is facilities management? They say it's the organizational function which integrates people, place, and process within the built environment with the purpose of improving the quality of life of people and the productivity of the core business. So, it's making sure that I kind of say sometimes it's all the boring stuff you don't really want to focus on, but it's oh so necessary. So you can then focus on the core activities. And this is it's a corporate statement, if you like, but it's very much transferable to all of us representing a community organization with a community asset. We're bringing people together from a place together in an asset. There's lots of processes which need to be dealt with, so we can focus on the core business of improving the quality of life of the people that we're representing and supporting within that community. So Graham's either sneezing or he's yawning. Was that a yawn? Okay, just checking. So facility management, I just think it's so important myself. It's a very important thing not to forget. And we kind of often see that was the idea behind the support service. It's often an afterthought for a community asset owning or managing organization. And that's why this support service we think is very valuable to help organizations take it into consideration as early as possible in the process of taking on an asset. This is a long list. We're not going to go through all of this, but it's to give an idea of the many legal and regulatory responsibilities that you may have. Some of them you will definitely have, maybe all of them, if you are a community owning and or managing an asset. If you're serving alcohol, if you're playing music, if you're showing video, there are licensing arrangements you need to have in place. Health and safety, obviously a very big topic. The Health and Safety at Work Act, there are legal considerations that you must make and certain things you must put in place. Certainly risk assessments, they must be up to date. Your first aid needs to be organized. The fire precautions, getting a fire risk assessment, making sure the points of that fire risk assessment are carried out on a periodic basis. The fire emergency lighting, the fire safety equipment, etc. The list goes on. Insurance, an important one, that you have an insurance policy which fits for purpose, that you're not underinsured, you're not overinsured, which is often what I find with community organizations with an asset as well, and you have the right insurance. The list goes on. If you're doing works to your building, do you need a building warrant, planning permission? How do you go about that? If you are renting out space in your hall, be that to a user who's coming, a group who's using the space every week for an hour, or you have a space in the hall, a room which you're renting out on a longer term basis to an organization, to another company or a local person. Do you have a lease in place which is fit for purpose, etc.? A whole range of things to consider. And again, if you go into our online open source resources, you can find information on all of these topics, which can help you understand your responsibilities, provide checklists, provide templates that you can use to put policies together, put documents together that are specific for your own situation. We spoke about the building fabric. and ensure regular inspection of your asset, sufficient maintenance and capital expenditure budget to avoid the deterioration of that asset. If that's not done, what we see is it can result in higher costs in the long term, because to rectify some things is going to cost more the longer you've left it. It can lead to a loss of services, users, and thus income. It's a consideration that, you know, the income level of our community owned managed asset needs to be at a certain level. It can mean the devaluation of an asset, which is an important one, certainly if you own that asset. And it can lead to extra health and safety risks and insurance cover problems should something go wrong. So a lot of the time I'm visiting groups, and we're focusing on also the building fabric as well, to make sure they understand the necessity for maintenance, to put a maintenance budget together, how to cost that, what kind of periodic timing should you redo things, etc. So looking at the building fabric is also an important consideration. Another long list: operational management. Again, there are a lot of things. Maybe one of these, maybe some of them, maybe all of these are applicable to your own situation. I'm not going to go through them all, but again, they can be found on our support service resource website to give detailed information on all of these topics and more. And we kind of say, it says it here at the top, we have checklists, we have templates that can be used via our support service, but what we're promoting is that all community organizations with an asset, if they own it, if they manage it, if they lease it, to put together a building manual. That's kind of the most important tip we give. Bring everything together in a building manual. It doesn't have to be huge, but it brings all your information together in one place. All your user agreements, all your instructions for the building, a template with an agenda when you need to do your statutory checks. Certainly when we're working with volunteers and new people come in, it's important to have it's good practice to have a manual where all that information is in one place. I'll come on to that again in a bit. Just to give a bit of data about the support service and what we've seen so far, what's been used, what it's achieved. So we have 4 very well used resources that are both being downloaded from the website a lot. And it's also the main resources that I use when I'm going to visit groups and I'm doing an audit of their community asset. That's the building handover checklist. So that is if you are looking to take on an asset, if you're in the pre-stage of taking on a community building. This is a checklist which will list all the most important questions to ask the current owner of the building prior to taking on that asset. You guys are all running a hall already, so it's less of a consideration, but it could be good practice, a good benchmark to download this checklist and to have a look and think, do I have all these things? Did I receive all these? Are there things that I can ask for? You may be renting the space, renting the hall. Some of you will be, I assume. So you can go to the landlord and ask for this information if it's missing and if it's going to be of use to you. Probably the most used checklist in the support service is the day one, what should be in place checklist. So it takes all the regulatory responsibilities, all the operational management topics, and it kind of prioritizes. It prioritizes what we feel are the most important ones to have in place if you were if it was just before your day one of opening your hall. But I use this a lot when I'm auditing a community building, a community asset, even if they've been open for 10 years. So we can kind of see, do you have these things in place? These are the most important priorities. And that's a very useful tool for identifying where your priorities should be to deal with some issues that have not been dealt with at the moment. Again, it kind of often leads to committee members or the facility manager within a community asset being able to sleep better at night, to know that they're able to tick off a number of priorities that maybe they're in the back of their minds, they've been niggling there. We don't make it overwhelming. That's the main thing with this whole support service. We kind of bring it back to, you can't do everything at once, you can't have everything done, but what are the priorities? What are the things to make sure really can be ticked off? And what's the plan to address other things in the medium to long term? The third one, we've got the checklist of the tasks required for managing your community facility. I think there's 2 checklists there. Yep. And it kind of all leads into a community hub or a community asset manual, which I was talking about. We're kind of promoting that everybody brings this together in, and it might be 1A4, it might be 50 pages. I've seen 2-page manuals, and I've seen 50-page manuals for other community buildings, community assets, but bringing everything together in one place as much as possible. And we have an example contents list. We don't have an example manual, but we have an example contents list that you can download and see what do we feel are the most important topics that should be included in that manual. So you can have a look at that, and you can look at your own hall, your own community asset, and decide which ones are relevant. And hopefully, I kind of say, open a Word document, just have it open on your screen. And when things pop up, you think, oh, that can go in the manual. You can use the contents list. So you've got kind of the different headings. And over the course of a couple of months, if you're dealing with something in the hall and you think that needs to go in the manual, opening times, I don't know, access codes, maintenance schedule for the biomass boiler, whatever, the PAT testing that's been done, try and find the heading it should go under, put in the information, and you can, over the period of time, build up a manual which is useful for yourselves and for anybody else who's going to be using the hall, running the hall in the future as well. We do training as well. That's important to mention. So we have a 2-day online facility management training with an external trainer. And that's been extremely popular this year. We've had 3 fully subscribed trainings, and we've put 60 plus, close to 70 groups through that training so far. We do that over 2 consecutive Tuesdays, if you like, or 2 consecutive Fridays. The trainer really does get 5-star ratings. She's great. And again, it's all about not making it overwhelming. It's about bringing it back to making it understandable and prioritizing. So it's heavily subsidized, costs £50 per person. We're just planning the dates for the next one, which is going to be the end of January, beginning of February. My details are provided on this presentation. So if there's anybody who's interested in taking part in that training and wants to have more information, just get in contact with myself, and I can provide some more information on that. Lastly, so I'm going to show you some of the Village and Community Halls Handbook, which is a digital resource that we've put together with SCVO. And it's basically all the resources that we already have online, but it's enlarging it to not only facility management, it covers governance, it covers digital halls, it covers the net zero journey, it covers people, it covers different types of tenure. And we've brought it all together in what we feel is an easy to use, user-friendly digital resource. I'm going to show you that in a minute. Apart from the training and the resource, I forgot to say, I'm visiting groups. So for the last year, I've been the facility management advisor. So often there are issues that are difficult to resolve or deal with just with the online resources. So I'm undertaking phone calls, video calls, and also visiting groups throughout the country to maybe help them with more complex issues they're having, to make sure they're compliant. Often to look at their energy efficiency, and kind of helping them with that net zero journey. What are the energy efficiency works that can be done within a community-owned asset, and also talking about funding. I know, I think that was George. No, was it Graham? Maybe was talking about funding of the hall, the funding journey. So the support service is not only the resources; it's also the opportunity to have a visit and some one-to-one support from the facility management advisor as well. Important to note that won't be me going forward, because I'm moving to the Community Shares Scotland team, one of the component parts of DTAS. But one of my colleagues, Ruth Evans, I'll make sure that together with this presentation, her contact details are sent. She is taking over the facility management support service. So nothing changes really. You just get someone who's much better versed in facilities management than myself, which is great. Last slide. So we kind of say timely and resourced facility management helps ensure that your community building and its operations are compliant, very important, efficient as possible, that it's a thriving asset, it's sustainable for the longer term, and you're able to focus on your core activities, because that's kind of what it's all about. The asset is there for a reason. It's there to make sure services, facilities can be provided to the local community. So that makes it even more important that the facility management tasks are kind of at least compliant, so that you can focus on those core activities for the future. I'm going to show you some of the website, some of the Hub Handbook website. But firstly, any questions on the slides so far? Anything anybody wants to ask me? Anything anyone wants to share about their own, the community asset, the hall that they're representing? Any questions, issues, queries? Please feel free.
Graham, did you have your hand up?
I did, yes, thank you. We're in the process of updating our very ancient constitution to a much newer beast.
Yep.
One of the problems that we've found is we're trying to get an additional power that will enable us to have this right to buy. And we, of course, quickly discovered that is a part of the Constitution that has to go not only to the Oscar, but it actually has to go to the Scottish Government.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of influence over that? Because I think it's taken at least a year so far with not a squeak. Yeah.
Not myself within the Facility Management Support Service, but I can definitely put you in contact with the Community Ownership Support Service advisor for Shetland, who can certainly help you with that.
Thank you.
So I can definitely do that. I'm going to note that down. So are you focused, is there a community right to buy? You're focused on a specific asset, are you?
Well, there is an asset which I think is going to come up, or might come up, let's put it that way.
Okay.
The Amenity Trust in Shetland owns a whole series of bods. And because of various things, including their financial situation, they are querying whether they're going to dispose of these assets.
Okay.
We don't want to see the one on Fekla going into kind of private house ownership.
Yep.
Because this is the best low-cost accommodation for visitors that we have on the island.
Yep. Yep. So, you know, putting in a community right to buy request is certainly a way to putting yourself in the best position. I mean, the community right to buy legislation does need a willing seller. That's the most important thing. But without doing it, if you don't do it, then that could be a mischance. And there are lots of good examples of communities putting in a community right to buy and going into negotiations with a willing seller and it being successful. There are also examples of putting in the community right to buy request that's been accepted, that's been lodged, that's been noted. Then they go into negotiations with a willing seller. It doesn't happen via the community right to buy legislation. It happens just as a private sale, but it came to fruition because that community right to buy was lodged in the first place.
Yeah.
I'm going to put you in contact with the Community Ownership Support Service advisor, one of my colleagues.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I can't see any other questions, Nick, but I did want to make a comment.
Sure.
About the manual or the handbook.
Yeah.
That as committees change, and I know this is something I've kind of mentioned before, when committees change, it's so helpful for new committees to have something which lays out what's
Absolutely.
happened before.
Yeah.
And often you get people saying that, well, we know what we're doing. Why do we need to write it down? But actually, in terms of thinking about the future and thinking about how to make it as simple as possible for new people to take on that role, having all of that information collated in one place can really, really help.
Absolutely.
So just would really encourage people
Yeah.
to think about that and
Yeah.
who comes after you in terms of succession planning for the hall.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it doesn't, as I say, my advice would be to start with our contents list, with our example contents list with the headings, and open up that Word file and just start building on it over a period of months. Otherwise, it can seem very overwhelming, certainly with all the ongoing tasks you will have with running that asset and the daily things that you're having to do. So, it's not something that's going to be achievable in most cases to sit down and put it all together in a period of a couple of days. It's going to be an ongoing thing, but just making that start and always coming back to it, you think, that's something, utility contracts, put it in there, the information, and just carrying on like that. That really is beneficial. Unfortunately, there's lots of groups that I visit where that hasn't happened, and what can start off as quite simple things can kind of run away with you. I'm thinking of one, it's a development trust with a quite large community asset, and something after that building was came into their ownership and their management, they did not put any of the operating and user instructions for their heating and ventilation system anywhere. So it was lost for 6 years. Nobody knew how to use them, and that system has gone into such a state of disrepair. Cost a lot of money to rectify that, and there's been a quite large knock-on effects just for something as simple as not having the user instructions and not dealing with that from day one. So it ended up being a search into the archive documents to find them, dig them out, but that was post a condition audit of the building and the installations, which cost quite a bit of money to actually do that audit, plus to rectify the problem. So I can't stress it enough that it's good practice to do that, but don't let it be overwhelming, and just do it on an organic basis, daily basis, whatever you feel is important, put it in that document, and that will grow over time. See, no questions, not many questions is always good, but it's also worrying as well. Hopefully I haven't overwhelmed people, or maybe it's just you're all on top of the facility management, and that's really great.
Caroline's got a question there.
It's not really a question. It's really just trying to say, how much I agree with Nick, because it is very difficult with long-standing committees for them to understand. That's why I've just given up after 14 years of trying to keep this together. Because it's over 14 years of having been the secretary of the hall, it's so hard to keep up with all the legislation and things, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is.
And that's why I think this idea of the organic bit.
Yep.
But trying to, my question would be, how do you engage people with recognizing how important it is that they do this and not just concentrate on the day-to-day bookings and the day-to-day running, because it's more the overall thing, isn't it, that I've struggled with. And this is going to be a boot. Even though I'm leaving, I'm going to be saying, look, it's all going to be here for you.
Exactly. So that's a really good point. I think you can still see the screen. So what I often advise people to do who have the responsibility for the facility management, for the facility, the asset, is to do that day one what should be in place checklist. It's kind of an audit, if you like. It's a benchmark, and it's a useful tool to identify things that are being done well and things that aren't being done as well as they should, whereby it might mean they're not compliant or not meeting regulatory responsibility. And that's great for informing where you need to focus, but it's also a good thing to provide to the management committee, or to provide to the other hall members or staff members or volunteers to show, look, these things need to be dealt with, and so that has worked certainly in a number of the organizations that I've been supporting, to get it on the agenda, to get it further up the agenda, if you like, to get that collective acknowledgement that certain things need to be improved, and also to make the connection why. But it's also about not making it overwhelming, because it can be. That's one of the things we very much focus on in the 2-day training, not make it overwhelming. Yeah, sometimes more easier said than done, but we try and do our best. Is it a good idea if I show a couple of the web
I was just
pages
going to
from-
say, I think Chloe or Amanda wanted to
Okay,
make a comment. I just,
Yes, I was just going to say, I think, well, I think all the other people know that the Borough Hall is one of the largest and most complex halls, or certainly right up there in Shetland. It's a huge building with lots of different function rooms and stuff, so it's really challenging. And yeah, so all of this is really perfect for this facility, but it'll be a long-term project trying to get, some of it's there already, but yeah, pulling it all together. These checklists are going to be great. So we might not have questions now, but I can assure you that we will in the long run.
Well, that's great. This, this support service is there. So please make use of it. If that's only using the digital resources, that's great. But if there are queries, questions, then please get in contact with us. That often leads to a call like this. And then we can identify if it's useful. It's beneficial for us to come out and do a visit. That's good to hear. But yeah, great.
Thank you.
Shall I just stop? I'm going to stop sharing this screen and then share another screen just to show you this other resource. What's this doing? Just bear with me. There we go. Now I'm going to share this one. Read this one. Okay, can everybody see this website?
Thank you.
And had anybody heard about this new resource that's been launched? So I've been working on this together with a couple of colleagues from SCVO the last 6 months to create a village and community halls handbook. Maybe some of you can remember that SCVO used to have something called the Keystone Resources. The Keystone Resources was a suite of resources for managing and running a village hall, and it also had a kind of a self-certification scheme, and it was you could get a mentor as well. I think that stopped a number of years ago now anyway, before my time with DTAS anyway. So we had some funding earlier this year from Scottish Rural Network to kind of reignite SCVO's Keystone Resources, to put it together in a more user-friendly digital format, to obviously go through and update all the regulatory legal considerations that they're up to date, and to include extra topics that we feel are beneficial for anybody who's involved in running a village or a community hall in Scotland. And this is what it's become. So it's been launched at the SCVO's gathering in Edinburgh a couple of weeks ago. We did lots of testing with groups beforehand to make sure that it was kind of hitting the sweet spot, if you like. So again, not being too overwhelming, but you can dive down into more detailed information if you need to, if you wish. Again, I would, lots of you are representing a hall, so this is a perfect, it's actually better than our standalone DTAS resources, because all our standalone DTAS resources are in here, but then much more information on top of that. So you can see for everybody running a village or a community hall in Scotland, and it covers governance, facilities management, net zero, digital. Here we go. So it has an introduction about who this handbook is for and about using it. It has information on taking on a community space. And it's not only if you're looking to take it on, this is also helpful if you've already taken it on and you can audit and benchmark. So some of the key things you need to consider when taking on a community space. And there you go. It says, even if you already have the building, checking through this section can help make sure you're on top of your lease, your structure, etc. So it has about owning the space, the different forms of owning, so freehold, leasehold, management agreement, memorandum of understanding, etc. And some top tips when you're getting ready to open as well, to things you need to have in place. It has lots of signposting to other third-party resources that can help you out. If we go back to the handbook, it has a section on governance. So setting up the right governance structure, managing that governance structure, changing the structure if that's necessary. So maybe going from unincorporated to incorporated. Has lots of information on that. Now, facilities management, what we're focusing on this evening, it pretty much covers, there we go, it's from my slide, so it covers the three main topics of legal and regulatory responsibilities, the operational management and the building fabric. Look at this one, breaks it down into certain sections, so talking about utilities, rates and running costs, find out all the information you need to know, where you need to go for information, people using your hall, so this one, setting up a booking system, advertising and promoting, putting together user agreements, so we have links to templates you can use to do that, etc. Opening your bank accounts, your procurement policy. I mean, the list goes on. We'll go back to the handbook. What else do we have? Digital village halls. I wasn't involved in this bit. This is an SCVO, put this together. But about a connected village hall. How can you get your village hall online? How can you become a digital champion for your community? Climate confident village halls. So this covers your energy efficiency and your net zero. So how to access a free audit of your community building, things to think about, differences between a rented leased premises and a freehold. So if you don't own, but if you rent your premises as a community, what are the things you can do to try and address the energy efficiency and maybe renewable systems on the building as well, because it's sometimes more difficult if you only lease the building, but this gives some tips that you can address to get into that discussion with your landlord. Again, it signposts to external parties who have some detailed guidance and support as well. And so the list goes on. Funding. This was an SCVO part. I think this was an already existing part of SCVO's digital resources, talking about funding for village halls, things to think about, finding funding, which basically links you to SCVO's Funding Scotland platform. We've got some good stories, which is growing. We're doing some, so we've got some nice articles from some village halls across the country. The first two videos are on there, and this is a growing part as well, to share stories, share success stories, and share issues that people managing village halls are having as well. And a whole long list of useful contacts split up into certain areas. So quite a detailed resource. Please use it, see what you think. Hopefully it's useful. Again, any questions on this, you can come to DTAS, you can come to the Facility Management Support Service to get next level of support. So if you've been through this, you've got the information you need, but you need to go a level deeper, or you haven't got the information you need, then you can tap into our support service to see if we can provide some further support. That's kind of me, I think. Unless there's more questions. Stop sharing my screen. Go. Hopefully that's been useful, interesting, and hopefully when you look at the resources and access some of the checklists, that will be helpful, making it not overwhelming, but giving you kind of a roadmap to making some improvements if and where they're necessary.
Thank you, Nick. I think that was really interesting, and I think that's an amazing selection of resources that people probably weren't aware were available. And when I looked at the checklists and stuff, I was like, oh, that's so useful to have it just written down so that you're not having to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
Because I think that's what it feels like sometimes when you come to something fresh and you think, oh, where do we start? And to have something that just gives you that outline to start with, I think is brilliant. And I'm sure that'll be really valuable. Lots of really valuable resources there. So thank you for sharing that.
You're very welcome.
Were there any more questions for Nick before I allow him to escape? Thank you so much for giving up your evening.
No problem at all.
No?
No,
Great.
I found it very useful though.
That's
Thank
good. Good to hear.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm off to
you.
take my
Thank you
youngest to
very
bed
much,
now. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks very much.
See you
And
later.
good luck
Bye.
with your new job
Thanks very much. Bye bye.
going forward. Okay, thank you.